collectors and sinners were coming to hear Jesus. You hear that? Tax collectors and sinners. Jesus might have done well just to turn them away. After all, we're known by the company we keep, aren't we? And tax collectors and sinners, they really aren't that good a company, especially in Jesus' time. Sinners, of course, that's the general term that can apply to any sinner. Tax collectors, on the other hand, that's kind of specific, isn't it? Tax collectors, those were Jews who sold themselves into the service of Rome. And they did that because it paid well. Tax collectors, they tended to inflate the tax bill too, and pocket the difference, and take their fellow Jews for a ride. People hated tax collectors, and for two good reasons. First, we know tax collectors cheated people, and second, because they had sold their souls to Rome, and Rome was the enemy. So tax collectors and sinners, they were coming to hear Jesus. And the scribes and the Pharisees, they were looking on as this happened. And they murmured to themselves, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." The scribes and Pharisees, they wouldn't have welcomed tax collectors and sinners. The scribes and Pharisees, they were scrupulous men who carefully avoided all appearance of evil. That's often a good idea, isn't it? Avoiding the appearance of evil. I recommend it to you. As you go about your business this week, be sure to avoid both evils and the appearance of evil. Don't do anything wrong, and don't do anything that would make you appear to have done anything wrong. But the scribes and Pharisees, they made one mistake here, one ungodly mistake. They believed that if anyone welcomed sinners, it was because he or she had approved of that sin. It was probably no better than the sinners themselves. That, after all, is the meaning of the phrase, "We're known by the company we keep." If we keep company with bad people, their bad mannerisms would probably rub off on us. So maybe the scribes and Pharisees were right. Maybe Jesus should have been more careful about the company which he kept. But that's not how Jesus saw it. He told the scribes and Pharisees a parable. There was a man who had two sons. We call it the parable of the prodigal son, don't we? And it's one of our favorites. I think this is probably one of the favorite parables that there is. And we love it because it promises us grace. And we know, each one of us knows deep down inside that we need grace. And most of you are familiar with this parable, but let me relate a couple of the important points. The father had two sons, and the younger son said, "Dad, give me my share of the estate." So the father divided it all up between his two sons, and he gave it to the youngest, his share. That's not how it's supposed to work, is it? Usually the sons would stay close to home and tend the father's land until he died. Then the sons would inherit the property and continue taking care of their mother. So when the younger son asked the father to give him his inheritance early, it was as if he was saying, "I'd rather you were dead." It was a slap in the father's face. But the father did what the younger son asked and gave him his share of the property. So to the younger son, the younger son took his inheritance and went off to a far country, a place where mom and dad couldn't look over his shoulders, and a place where he could just do whatever he wanted. Jesus said that he squandered his wealth in wild living. I'll leave that to your imagination to figure out what that really meant. When engaged in wild living, you burn through money pretty fast, don't you? Soon the young man was broke, and the economy tanked, and the young man's friends were nowhere to be found. So the young man had to go out and look for a job. And having no money, and having no friends, and having few skills, the only job he could find was feeding pigs. A job that wouldn't be any good Jew would ever have a job like that. That's important, He was so hungry that he was tempted to eat pig slop. Ew. to him that his father's servants, they didn't live like that. They had plenty to eat. So he decided to go back home and beg for a job. If his father would just hire him on as a servant, he would begin to pull his life back together. So, he practiced this little speech, and he started off for home, and he planned to say this. He wanted to say, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants." It was a long way home. And I kind of figured that as he's walking home, he practiced this speech over and over and over again. So he memorized it, and he knew exactly what to say. But the scripture tells us that while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The boy started off on his little speech, right? But the father cut him off. He ordered his servants to bring his son a robe, the best robe, and a ring and shoes. And then he told him to go kill the fatted calf so that they could celebrate. "For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." That's the part we love, isn't it? Because it promises that no matter how bad we've been, no matter what kind of mischief we get into, we can always come to God, and He will always welcome us. That, my friends, happens to be true. But that isn't the point. At least, it isn't the only point. And it might not even be the main point here. Jesus started by saying, there was a man who had 2 sons. So what about the other son, the elder son? Keep in mind that the thing that prompted this parable was the scribes and the Pharisees commenting on Jesus when he welcomed sinners and ate with them. Just like the father in this parable welcomed his sinner son. But the scribes and the Pharisees, they weren't happy about Jesus welcoming tax collectors and sinners. The scribes and the Pharisees, they were kind of like that older son, the elder son. And like him, the scribes and the Pharisees, they stayed home and they did their duty. Like the older son, the scribes and the Pharisees, they had no use for sinners. Most of the time, we focus on the prodigal son, the sinner, and we ignore the elder son, the one who stayed home. But I believe that the story of the elder son, it contains the main point of this 2-point parable. When the prodigal came home, when the prodigal son came home, the elder son, he was out working in the field. When he came home, the older son, when he came home, he heard music and dancing. And he asked one of the servants, "What's going on?" And the servant said, "Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf because he has him back safe and sound." But the older son, he got angry, didn't he? And he wouldn't go in to join the celebration. And listen carefully to this. His father went out and pleaded with him, begging him. Fathers aren't supposed to beg their kids, are they? But the older son said this. He said, "Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you killed the fatted calf for him." There's several things I noticed about that little speech the older brother said there. First of all, the older son said that he had never disobeyed his father. But he was in the process right then and there of disobeying his father, wasn't he? The father had begged him to come in, and the son had refused and had disobeyed him. And second, the older son's speech there is just full of self-pity, and it's empty of love. He loves neither brother nor father, and I doubt he truly loves himself. And I doubt that, he's been at home doing his duty. But he's had no joy in doing that, has he? No joy in being with his father. And the third point here, the elder son speaks of his brother as this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes. You know, that's the first mention of prostitutes in this parable, isn't it? Truthfully, the elder son doesn't know what his other brother has done. He's just consumed with anger. And the father says, he says, my son, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because your brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. Hey, let me ask you this question. Which was the good son and which was the bad son? You know, in truth, both were bad sons. The younger brother for squandering his father's money and living loose. And the older brother for disobeying his father and for hating his brother. You know, whether you're a sinner like the prodigal son or a sinner like the elder son, this parable has something for you. It tells you that the Father loves both sons, and it means that God loves you. But it also tells us that the dutiful, self-righteous elder son has the larger blessing. The younger son can ask for forgiveness, but the elder son, he can't imagine that he even needs forgiveness. So the elder son is like the scribes and the Pharisees. His soul is in danger. So are you the prodigal son? If so, start moving towards home, asking for forgiveness, and lose yourself in your Father's love. Are you like the elder son? If so, get over it. Go into the house, wrap your arms around your brother, and welcome him home. Are you neither one? Be thankful that you have been spared the pain that those brothers suffered. If you are neither the prodigal nor the elder son, celebrate your blessing and give God the glory. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.